Hey class, welcome back. We're here with Trayvon Alexander. In case you weren't sure exactly who she is, she has this sign right here, Miss Alexander, but she actually is married, so there's an R missing. So LCSW. We've got to love that. So we're going to talk in this segment about engaging and forming an alliance. So why is that important? So tell me about that for you. What does that mean to you to form an alliance?
Forming an alliance means to me establishing a partnership with someone, establishing a trusting relationship where you can encourage and empower and facilitate change. I think relationships are the drivers of change, and forming that alliance is the beginning of that.
And here, it's not just the kids, but it's the kids and the teacher and their parents.
Absolutely.
And if the family was really involved in a church, it might be the pastor. Whatever is part of the system of that kid. So I remember you sharing a case with me last spring where you had really worked to form an alliance with a really difficult to engage mom. And then you were out of the office one day. Could you maybe just take us through that in a quick, elevator pitch?
Sure. So I was working with a student who was presenting with some suicide related behaviors. Mom came in and talked to us about that student's history, what she had been doing to work with him, the relationship she had with her mother, which was not very good. And just her ability to open up to me about that was something that was a surprise to many of the staff here in the office, because mom had presented to the school on numerous times, just really highly agitated and unrelatable. She felt that the school was not an ally but against her, and for me to engage and kind of empathize with how she was feeling and things that have occurred, how that might have led to her feeling the way she felt. She felt that I was able to see things through her lens, that helped us forge the relationship. So one day I was not at this school site because I serve multiple school sites, and the student presented with similar behaviors, with suicide ideation. And when the student presented to the office, instead of contacting me, because I had the history of the case and had built a relationship with mom, a hotline was made. And after that hotline was made, the trust was it was gone. Like, she no longer trusted the school at all, and rebuilding that trust is something that's very, very difficult to do. And we could have, the bottom line is we could have prevented such a situation and really worked in a way
By
to save
using
the plan for
our
the kid.
relationship.
Exactly.
So what is your number one relationship building skill?
Is
Besides your
one.
great accent.
You know what? That does kind of mesmerize people a little bit. But other than this accent, my number one relationship skill is empathizing with the client's situation and their perspective of what's happened. Even if I may not necessarily agree, but just really being objective and listening to them, empathizing with them, validating their feelings, and just giving them feedback on that. It helps them to feel that you are really listening and that you understand. And once they feel that, then you can start the trust building.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you, Trayvon.
You're welcome.
Welcome back, class. We're here with Flora at Rediscover. In this segment, we're going to talk about engaging and forming an alliance with clients. Now, you heard me talk that clients aren't always just the person sitting in front of you seeking services. Clients at a meso and macro level. So, for instance, Swope Park, which is another community mental health provider, they are a client of Rediscover, and Rediscover is a client of theirs. Also, her staff are her clients. So she's got to form alliances with people who come here for services, as well as the staff that are providing those services. So what is that, what do you see as your strength when you engage clients and form those alliances? Why is that important to you?
Clients got to know that they trust you, that they trust me, that they know that I'm competent. So, and starting to build that alliance and creating that rapport with that client, they just want to know, like everyone else, that they're being heard. That I'm understanding, that I'm being empathetic to them, to their situation. So, in doing those things, that's creating that rapport and therefore guiding towards that alliance where they're willing to engage in that therapeutic process with me as well. And so, as you were saying, like building that alliance with my team, that's the same way. They have to know that I'm listening, that I'm empathetic to whatever they're going through, and that I'm competent as a clinician, as a supervisor, and so trusting me in their process and in their growth, and so that they're willing to engage in the process, especially when I'm asking them to go outside of their scope, especially like you said, not everyone is a social worker or come from a social work background. So when they trust me as a supervisor, then they can go out and trust the process, and then their clients can begin to engage and trust them. So yeah, there's so many ways of having to do that as well.
Have you ever met or had a client that when you look back, you didn't engage the way you had wished you had engaged?
I'm sure. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but knowing me and my personality, like sometimes when a client is really resistant, and sometimes having to know yourself when you're kind of like feeling that resistance of the client. And so my response probably was not as engaging or as empathetic or understanding of that person's situation. So again, I can't think of one particularly.
For me, when I had clients that there was some resistance, it was easy to say, they don't want to work on their lives, or they're not ready to make change. But in reality, right, as I have matured as a social worker, and I look back on that, it's really more often than not, it's something I'm not doing right. It's not the client, which means I'm maybe not listening to them or hearing them or meeting their needs. So it's something I need to do differently rather than they're just, treatment resistant or whatever, and then label them like that. So.
And I gotta know when I'm hitting that place with that client. And so a lot of times I might stop in that moment and come back, to readdress it so that I don't lose that opportunity.
When you're forming that alliance with the client, is it okay to get negative feedback from the client about your methodology or your approach?
Yeah.
Do you take it personal?
No, you can't. You gotta, one, they may not understand it. They don't trust you yet. They don't trust the process. So it's no different than you and I, having a disagreement about a process or how to do something. So I have to respect how they're feeling about,
absolutely.
that same thing.
Yeah, that's okay to get negative feedback.
Yes, sir.
Because actually, how do you grow if you don't have some negative feedback? So.
For sure, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Flora. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Welcome back, class. We're here with Evan, who's a social worker and LCSW at the KU Med Center. So currently, he works in the hospital, but he's on the psych unit. And so when a patient needs a psych consult, Evan will go in and kind of do the initial assessment. And we'll get to assessments here in a little bit, next segment. But what is that like, engaging and forming that alliance? I know, because I know your work history, you've been in jobs where you saw the same client week in and week out for 3 or 4 months at a time. Here, you don't really necessarily have that luxury to take 90 days to build an alliance. So what is that like as far as building your alliance?
Well, it can be difficult. It can be really easy, just depending on the patient. Obviously, people who are in a hospital setting or just in life in general are going through various things. So they always say, meet where the client's at. So really that's what I try to do, is to go in and just introduce myself, introduce what my role is, and then asking very kind of broad questions about how they think I could help, or what is it that's going on that led them to come to the hospital. And then from there, just trying to weave in and to introduce some ideas, promote some insight, but honestly, just listening to the patients or to the client. That's the best way to build rapport. They always talk about paralinguistics, the eye contact, the active listening, the nodding of the head, just the really simple things, being nice, broad, and open to the patient. So using those techniques to kind of listen and validate, normalize, and try to help wherever they think that they need help.
Now we're going to go kind of squirrel for a minute.
Okay.
So what you can't tell, class, on this video is that Evan is very tall. He's not standing in the video, he's very tall. So we would have conversations about just his presence because he is a really tall guy. And that changes sometimes how you engage a client, how you walk in a room. I think there were times where medical staff were like, just send Evan in there, he's really big, he'll calm the situation down, but that's not really your style. You're not aggressive. But do you think about your height when you're trying to engage a client and they're in a bed and you're 6 feet plus?
Yeah, you got to find a seat.
You got to find a chair.
You got to find a chair. You got to kind of sit back. You kind of got to not make it seem like you're in a rush, just trying to do the check boxes and to get out. Even though that's easy to do, it's just not effective. So getting down to the patient's level is key.
Yeah. So when we say meet the clients at where they're at, that isn't just their mental state. That's also the physicality. When meeting, because I worked with kids for so long, and meeting a very young kid for the first time, I know there have been times where I got down on one knee to just introduce myself. That way I was eye to eye with them, rather than, and I'm not very tall, I'm short, but I'm taller than a 6-year-old for the most part. And there's that power differential which impacts the alliance and engaging. So you do have to sometimes really think about the room, the presence, your strengths, your weaknesses, your height, all of those things when we engage. So, do you ever whip out your Canadian accent?
I can't hide it.
Can't hide it. All right, I'm just teasing Evan. So, all right, thank you, Evan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome back, class. We're at Children's Mercy here with Sonia Duran. So, Sonia, clients, how do they get referred to the TIES program?
They can get referred through any other agencies, or also self-referred, or any other clients as well.
All right, so a client comes in, so do you do a comprehensive assessment to identify what their needs are? So tell me a little bit about that. How do you assess clients?
We use different tools, and we check for safety, we check for domestic violence, we check for depression, which we also check for mental health. So we use different things.
So just out of curiosity, are the tools something that you lead in a discussion with a client, or are they questionnaires the clients fill out, or both?
I would say both, but I usually do it with the client.
Do it with the client.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask, are the tools in Spanish, since you're working with Spanish-speaking clients?
Some of them are.
Some of them are, but some of them aren't.
Some of them are not, but if they are not, then I look for a version in Spanish, or I translate it myself.
Okay, all right. So, what is the most important skill that a social worker needs in an assessment, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it would be, well, first, having a good rapport with the client, and then I would say respecting the client.
Respecting the client, all right. I think that's an excellent suggestion. So, all right, well, thank you, Sonia, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey class, welcome back. We're with Sonia. We just finished a segment on assessment, and I thought to mention, I'm catching her off guard here. I thought we should also mention Sonia works out in the community, right? You go into the homes. So assessment for you is also assessing the safety of the home, right? Sometimes you go to the home and it's not just your client sitting there, but it might be a family member of hers or her boyfriend or people you don't even know. So you have to constantly assess your environment.
Correct.
So have you had some situations where you maybe didn't feel very safe?
Yes, there have been, I would say, several situations, but that's why it's important that as soon as I park my car, then I start scanning and making sure that everything is safe. I receive several trainings on that from my supervisors, talking about that. Like as soon as we get into the home and then entering the home, we have to always make sure like we are scanning for safety.
I know when I've done in-home work and I pull up to a house and there's 3 cars in the driveway, I'm always curious, who do they belong to? And you go into the house and there's only 1 adult there, and I'll ask, I noticed there was 3 cars in the driveway. Are those all yours? Who do they belong to? Because there were been times where I thought we were the only ones in the house, and then you hear a noise upstairs, or someone just walks through the living room and you didn't know that you weren't alone. And I know that would always make me feel a little insecure maybe. So I'm going to tag this section with the assessment section because I thought it's important for you all to hear that assessment just isn't the client, while it is, but it's also the environment, where you're going to, where you're working, because not only is it important for your clients to be safe, but it's really important for you to be safe and not put yourself in an unsafe situation. So thank you for letting me catch you off guard on that one, Sonia. Hey class, we're back for a third segment with Melanie down at the Futures program at Truman Hospital. And we're going to talk in this segment about engaging clients and forming an alliance. So your client focus has shifted quite a bit. When you were working with mother and baby, obviously the baby is your client, but other than their crying and the medical information they're giving you, they're not really engaging in a relationship with you. Now you're shifting, you're working with kids here at the Futures program. So talk a little bit about the value of creating that alliance. What are the top 1 or 2 things that you think you're really great at when it comes to forming an alliance?
Well, I mean, honestly, it hasn't, I mean, my focus is shift, but my value of doing that hasn't. I think that's the first thing, is to see the importance of building rapport with people. You know, it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time, but I think it does have to be somewhat intentional, that you're going to spend.
Intentional, that's a really great word. Great.
That you're going to spend this time, you know, getting to know someone on a human but professional basis, because that's how we gather that assessment information that is so important to having a good plan, whether it be a mom, you know, who's had a baby, or a young person here in my office who's feeling depressed, or, you know, whatever it is. If we don't have that, then I'm either dictating to them, you know, or they're dictating to me. You know, the rapport in that initial relationship building period. And here, I just build it into my treatment plan, like no matter what. You know, I initially meet with them, with the adult and the child, but the first time I don't even try to do anything besides build rapport, you know, and whatever their age is. I think it's an incredibly important thing to do. And I think that's probably what makes me good at it, is just that is what I do. That it's important to me. And I want what I do to have value for them. And if I don't know them, and if I don't have any connection with them, then it's just going to be what I think is valuable and may not be actually helpful at all.
Right. When I think about, as you outlined kind of who you are, why social work and your experiences, it's clear to me that each one of those probably has built like another level of your practice, right? And each one of those gave you something to build on. And I think with all the guest lectures that I've had in regards to this question, the word intentional is such a powerful word. There are times I would accidentally just do the right thing, and then there were times more often than not, I accidentally did the wrong thing with clients. But being intentional about how you reach out to them, I think is really important, especially for foundation students that are coming into the field maybe right out of their bachelor's program, or maybe a non-traditional student and they're shifting, you know, out of the finance world or real estate. But how to intentionally go about forming an alliance. Because even now today, I'll meet people in the field of social services and they act like they don't even like people, right? Or they don't even like kids, or they don't like people. And I don't know how you can be intentional if that's the juices that you're giving off, you know? So what's your favorite thing to do? Favorite first question, favorite thing that you do to engage?
Well, here in the clinic, I mean, for one, I always have toys.
Big fan of this guy right here. Oh yeah, on the Green Lantern guy.
And I always
yeah.
just try to notice what they're playing with. You know, if there's pins, and I usually have some other drawing stuff down here. If they're drawing, then I try to kind of follow what they're doing and engage that way. And sometimes some kids don't do anything, you know, and they want to talk or they don't want to talk. Some kids don't want to talk to me at all, and that's, to me, you know, I just kind of wait it out with them, and we will build
Right.
rapport eventually, but
Right.
this is just not the moment. And I think that's part of it too. Like, it's my agenda. It's not always going to be right away. So, you know, I just try to be as patient as I can, and it's hard.
In private practice, a couple of years ago, I got referred a case. The social worker who told the caseworker, I can't engage him, he won't talk. And I think maybe he would do best with a social worker that does EMDR, which isn't a real talky therapy. So the case manager reached out to me. I do EMDR. I sat down with this kid. The first time I was with him, he never quit talking. And I remember saying to him, your other social worker said he couldn't engage you. Do you have any thoughts about that? And this was an older, 15-year-old kid, and he said, yeah, I wasn't talking to that guy. And I said, why is that? And he goes, because he wasn't listening to me. So why do I want to talk to someone who isn't listening to me?
Yeah, kids can tell.
They
They
can.
really can.
They
I had
can.
a little guy, first thing he did was make a fort underneath my table, and he just stayed there the whole time. So I just hung out. I talked to him a little bit, but clearly he wasn't going to talk to me. But the next time he came, that's all he did. He was all over the office, and he had all sorts of things to say, So I think sometimes they are kind of testing us a little, just seeing, if we'll wait, or, if we're going to really engage with them in an honest way.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much, Melanie.
thank you.
Appreciate it.